And lined up, as we see on pole position, Paul Lewis on the Maxi Flow Yamaha 250. There, in fact, is the grid. Watch that man. He's a flyer, and he ideally suits these lightweight bikes because he couldn't be more than about 7.5 stone. Greg Johnson goes hard. Chris Oldfield with that Rotax engine built in Austria. Hard rider. Lee Roebuck, very experienced on 20 in 4th grid position on the front row. Michael Dowson will join them. Had a good run in a race we won't be seeing, a 250 production race earlier. Was running well. Duncan Reed there, coming down, normally rides a 750 Yamaha, but slotting himself onto a 250. And it should be a hard race indeed.
In fact, Dowson took almost 2 seconds off the lap record for the 250cc production bikes, and that's really flying when you consider that there's nothing that you can do to them to make them go faster except ride better.
Chris Oldfield's had good performance from the Austrian Rotax, number 17. One of the few variants from the almost universal Yamaha motors. They're twin-cylinder, water-cooled 2 strokes across the frame, as we see 77 being towed back to the pits. John Mackay, Dennis O'Day. A breakdown from the previous sidecar race. And as soon as that and anything else around the circuit is cleared, we'll be underway with this event, to be held over 15 laps. So that's 27.5 kilometres.
Paul Lewis, the leader of the Australian 250cc Championship at this stage, with 30 points from Greg Johnson beside him on bike 5 on 28. Chris Oldfield beside him on bike 17 on 27 points. So only 3 points separate the top 3 riders in this competition, and that makes it very close indeed. Paul Lewis won the first 2 rounds in Tasmania and South Australia, but he fell in Queensland 2 weekends ago in a 350cc race, and his bike was too badly damaged, and in fact he was too badly damaged to race in the 250cc Championship in Lakeside. At one stage they thought in fact he'd even broken his back, but after hospital attention he was found to be quite okay and here today. He did, however, break his bike yesterday, broke the crankshaft in the last round of practice yesterday afternoon, and has an all-night working session to get the bike fit for today's race on pole position. 15 laps of the Amaroo Park circuit.
Just to run through the front row of the grid again. 3 is Paul Lewis, 5 Greg Johnson, the Victorian, 17 the Englishman settled out here, Chris Oldfield, young fair-haired chap from Goulburn, Lee Roebuck on 20, and on 147 from South Australia, Michael Dowson.
In fact, from Western Australia, Will, he's travelled all the way across the Nullarbor Plain to be here today. His mother and father have come with him. They tow a variety of race bikes, some 4 of them in fact, behind a panel van, and they sleep in the van simply for economic sake. So a real racing family. The young bloke, Mike Dowson, also still races motocross and is currently the Prince of the Cross, a Western Australian motocross event.
Talking of racing families, looking there at 43, Tony Hinton, and yet another of that famous racing family, the family that's won more Bathurst Grand Prix than anybody else, and is a relative of that family, Rob, Eric, Harry the father, who've all raced and distinguished themselves here and overseas. To his left on 120 is Rob Hunter. 23 is Rob Donnelly.
And there's the reason for the delay in the start of the Australian 250cc Championship. Oil spread across the top of the circuit by the sidecars, and that oil must be removed, essential that it be removed, before the solo bikes can go out, because otherwise we would see a melee at the top of the circuit.
And I strongly suggest that you keep your eyes on ABC television at 9:15 on Friday, September 11, for a film called Descent on the Mountain. It's 50 minutes. That's a film made about this Easter's motorcycle racing at Bathurst, but it's more than that. It's more than just a glimpse of some wonderful motorcycle racing, some tremendous skills and high speed. It's a film of the whole atmosphere of Bathurst, all that goes on at night and in the daytime. People arriving in the town, people camping, some of the nonsense that goes on up at the top of the mountain. And I'm not saying that it's a great film because we're talking about it on ABC. It's a production out of the same organisation. It's because I regard it as one of the best films I've ever seen on sport generally and specifically motorcycling. A wonderful effort by David Wood, some music specially written for it. And I know there's a lot of people who've been lucky enough to see the preview already who will be, I think, one hesitates to say in the light of the current copyright discussions, but I think he'll be videotaping it because it's got a lot that's well worth looking at several times.
Also one of the best balanced films, or best balanced coverages, I would suggest, of what goes on at Bathurst at Easter. You read reports which one could perhaps say were extravagant in their coverage of the incidents that occur on the top of the mountain, and this film doesn't hide the warts. It tells everything as it happened, but it puts it in perspective, and it's the true perspective.
So keep your eyes, keep that date in mind, Friday, September 11, the weekend of the Sandown Hang 10 400 meeting, which also will be covered by the ABC. That Friday night at 8:45, it's 50 minutes, and it really is, I can say to anybody interested in any form of sport, that they'll be well entertained indeed.
And particularly, of course, if you want to see how to get round Bathurst quickly, the film takes you for a ride with Dennis Neal on the big Honda CB 1100R superbike, and it is some of the most spectacular footage on board that I have ever seen in motorcycle racing. It is magnificent.
And good to have this Australian Road Racing Championship round at Amaroo Park. The fourth round of the series, the fifth round is at Wanneroo at the end of September. The sixth round is not certain as we look at a crowd enjoying a great day's entertainment at Amaroo Park. But the sixth round scheduled for December for Sandown Park. There's one round in each state of Australia through the year of this national road race title. But our next appointment at Amaroo Park for motorcycle racing will be 2 weeks after the James Hardie 1000, and that's the Castrol 6-hour, run since 1970, the classic of Australian production motorcycle racing, always produces an enormous entry of Australia's top riders, a lot of factory support and dealer support, sometimes some new motorcycles. We hope to see new Katana Suzuki, but that's very dependent on them getting the requisite number of bikes off the boat and registered, sold and registered by next Tuesday night, the closing date for qualification, September the 1st, as we look at a 650 Katana on the Marshall, being ridden by the Marshall there at the top of the circuit, but that's nothing like the very avant-garde styling of the 1100 and the 750 Katana, which personally I don't think looks as well. It looks as clean and as neat as the 650, but a very quick and purposeful bike indeed.
In fact, the leading 1100 Katanas already in Australia, they were air freighted out to be prepared for the Castrol 6-hour, and people like Alan Hales already have their machines and intend running them for the first time in the Pirelli 3-hour race at a Surface Paradise in 2 weeks' time. And here's news that's just come through. In practice this morning, Andrew Johnson has broken the outright lap record and brought it down to the low 54s, the record being held on a 350cc machine by John Pace at 54.6 seconds. So we're looking forward later today to lap record shattering times here at Amaroo Park. The riders' heartbeats, I guess, at this stage would be up around about 200 beats per minute.
That's an average speed of 126.7 kilometres an hour.
And that's quick for a little circuit like this. It really is. There's not much difference between the smaller 250cc machines, such as we're looking at the moment, and the big outright bikes. The lap record for the 250s is only a couple of seconds less than that for outright. In fact, the lap record for the 250s is a 56.4, which has been held for 3 years by Murray Sale, the Kawasaki rider, and the outright lap record is a 54.5. So, in fact, 2.1 seconds the difference between the 250s and the outrights.
The tense face of Michael Dowson. Riders don't like delays. They get themselves psyched up to a certain schedule, expect the start to happen in a certain time, and this sort of thing can make them jittery. Paul Lewis, 3. Greg Johnson, 5. 17, Chris Oldfield. 50 behind him. Paul Imfern, Lee Roebuck, 20.
And as they get away on the warm-up lap, the defending champion, Graham Geddes, of course not here this weekend. He's racing in Europe this year after winning the Australian 250cc championship in 1979 and 1980. Lewis was second last year to Geddes. He got 63 points in the championship to Geddes 72. It was decided in the final round at Sandown Park. This year, Lewis looks in the box seat. And there's the oil you can see over the top of the circuit, and the riders would have been paying very close attention to that because it's right on the racing line and they won't want to make any mistakes on the slippery oil at the top of the track. Bike 147, Michael Dowson, the Western Australian.
In front of him, Peter Walker on 39. There's Lewis, the lean, angular frame in third place there in that group on number 3. 23 there leading a pack is Rob Donnelly. Warming up not only tyres and brake pads, but mechanical parts generally, motor, transmission, and of course the riders getting their minds into gear. Peter Hinton on 33 as they come round now. Form up. 15 laps. The Maxim Motorcycles Australian 250cc Championship. Quarter litre, but over 50 brake horsepower. Very quick bikes indeed. Michael Feehan going to join the grid from the left of picture there on 37 as he comes round the access road. There he is. Takes up his position on the grid. All in readiness. In a matter of seconds, they'll be watching anxiously the Australian national flag for the start of this 15-lap race.
Here we go.
A great start from Oldfield on the Rotax on 17. Lewis slots in behind him. In behind him is Rob Donnelly, but Lewis, lightweight and so well suited to these smaller, lesser powered bikes. And some of the field treating that cement dust and previously oily section very cautiously and allowing themselves to run a little bit wide as Lee Roebuck slots himself into third place on 20. But Lewis hounding Oldfield. Holding the bike very tight out of Honda corner. But no faster than Oldfield as they go down to Winfield. Hard on the anchors now, first gear, and then feed the power on gently so that it doesn't go sideways and punch it out. With Roebuck in behind them, the 27-year-old Goulburn rider on 20. 1 lap completed, 14 to go.
Lewis now challenging across the top of the hill. He won't do it this lap, but my goodness, he was close as he went up the hill. Big look behind him there to see what sort of competition he's got behind him, because that will very much influence his race tactic for the next 14 laps. If anyone had been behind him, he obviously would have to have watched his back as well as trying to get through bike 17, Chris Oldfield.
Behind this pair in first and second, Roebuck in third on 20 is Greg Johnson, fourth on 5. Fifth place on 39, Peter Walker. Sixth place on 50, Paul Imfern.
Already a 2-second gap back to third position from his battling duo in the lead.
Winding up now as we look at Roebuck in third place on 20 to 170-75 kilometres an hour over the top of Bitchapave. Hard left, must get your clipping point right, then straighten up. The new race leader doing it well through that section. Now in third gear through Dunlop is Lewis on 3 and running away from the Rotax powered bike number 17. Trying to run away, and talking of that, there's the bike that's run away with the rider. You can see the rider not too badly injured. That's Tom Cull from Western Australia. Had mechanical problems in the 350 race, and bad luck for him. He's been doing all the championship rounds, and no way to end a long haul from Western Australia. Full of enthusiasm. Lewis there getting sideways too, but holding on to it.
But in the wind-up for the run up the main straight, that will cost Lewis dearly, because Oldfield got a good run through, and as you can see, he's slingshotting up the straight now. It'll be very much up to the power of Lewis's bike, and he does, he holds him out.
Oldfield greatly improved over the last 18 months. He's really come to the fore. Had a good run in the series last year. That was the first year he really started to shine. Look at that little lightweight frame in front of him, and that's a big advantage. Less weight to brake, less weight pushing the tyres sideways in a corner, less mass to accelerate as you come out of a corner, and that's critical on these lesser powered bikes. A great battle going on. They're coming up to finish 4 laps. They have 11 to go.
Lewis already has had one injury this year. He crashed in Tasmania in the 350cc event as Oldfield takes him around the outside, and Lewis claims it back again. Lewis dislocated his knee in Tasmania earlier this year and is still giving him a little bit of bother.
Lewis broke a wrist last year in the Amaroo round of the National Championships. Rushing down the hill now through that fast right-hander, now down several gears, and the lead changes as in a daring manoeuvre. Oldfield goes through to the lead and will lead on the run down to Winfield unless Lewis can outbrake him. But Oldfield won't let him have the apex of the corner, but does run wide, and Lewis trying to slap on the power early there and still manages to do it, but gee, then is held out by Oldfield. Well, determined riding from Lewis, daring riding, but Oldfield matching it all the way.
And Oldfield gave Lewis no option, then just closed the gate on him through that corner.
Still third, Lee Roebuck on 20, fourth. 39 coming through is Peter Walker. 15 now comes up into 5th place, and 147 Michael Dowson is 6th. 5 it was, not 15, that's Greg Johnson.
Oldfield all over the machine, using his body English to good advantage. Lewis much smoother on the bike, tucking himself in, trying to stay out of the windstream.
Well, Lewis doesn't like that corner, or hasn't got it sorted out, because the bike is stepping sideways there quite frequently. Quite a jump up in the apex of the corner there, and if you get too much power on or get it on too early, that's what happens. And there's the dice. Greg Johnson on 5, bringing up 4th place, behind Lee Roebuck in 3rd on 20. And you can see a whole pack of bikes behind him. Peter Walker on 39. There's Roebuck, there's Johnson, Walker, and joining them 33, Peter Hinton. Great racing here as well as the dice up front. Tremendous stuff. Roebuck not at all short of 3rd place, being reined in there by Greg Johnson, the Victorian, on 5. But look at him being stalked also. Wonderful stuff for the minor 3rd placing. 33 in behind them is Peter Hinton. Coming out of Honda corner, rushing down now to Winfield. Nowhere to go if you'd misjudge your braking there. Must get through this stop corner. Only a wall to greet you. Coming up to complete 7, start their 8th. It's a 15-lapper, so halfway through this lap, the race leaders. Here, Lewis leading from Oldfield, have covered half race distance.
And a new lap record, 56.2 seconds. The lap record set by Oldfield on the previous lap when he was in the lead. That's 0.2 of a second under the existing record, as Lewis looks right around to see where Oldfield got to. He was just on the other side of it.
I know a bootmaker who'd like the concession on knee leather as Oldfield goes through into the lead on Lewis. And that's not uncommon for riders actually to end up bleeding from the knees and sometimes from the feet in a longer distance race, as happened to Ron Bolden in the Yamaha 750 production race at Oran Park, wearing through their boots. And the boot's only good for a couple of races, particularly in production racing.
The two riders slowing themselves down now. That lap was a 58-second lap with 2 passing manoeuvres in the 1 lap, and that's what cost them the time.
And in fact, the knees take such a hammering. A lot of riders fit plastic inserts into the knees, into zippered pockets in the leathers. You can see there that Lewis would be one who'd like that equipment. On 3. Oh, great racing. Not identical. The engine runs north-south in the frame. The Austrian Rotex, both of them water-cooled. The Yamaha lies transversely in the frame, in the second of those 2 bikes. The Rotax has been going well in Grand Prix racing in Europe. A very expensive motor worth some $10,000.
Oh, Lewis slams. Just look at the power of Oldfield's bike up the straight. It is extraordinary how much it can gather in a straight line.
The new Chinese motto is he who hesitates is overtaken. As Oldfield showed back there half a lap ago, with Lewis now looking good through the Dunlop loop, completing 9 laps. Is on his 10th, coming up to 2/3 distance.
Lewis, a man so determined to go motorcycle racing, as we see one rider down there in the loop. He's gone into the bank fairly heavily.
And that's Michael Dowson, the West Australian. Bad luck for him.
Long way to come to end up with the bike down and you injured.
But knocked about and probably a bit short of wind and probably slightly shocked, but and wanting a rest at this stage, but seemingly okay in a sense of major injury, as Lewis leads Oldfield up over the top for the 11th time.
And that's the furthest apart they've been for the entire race, but they'll gather up again as they go past Michael Dowson's accident.
This young man so determined to go overseas to South America this year for the opening rounds of the World Championship Series on small bikes. Was running raffles at Sandown to try and raise money, but didn't quite pull it off. Finally had to cancel those plans and stay here. But a man who is determined to get overseas, very young, a lot of talent, and in stature superbly suited to these small bikes, or to that matter for riding a horse, but he's chosen a mechanical, very high-speed horse and does a great job of it. Building up now to top gear and to maximum speed. Looking good against Oldfield, wearing him down slightly. Not to the tune of very much, as you can see, but just pulling out a few metres that look to be setting him with something of a buffer, and cheeky enough to look over his outside left-hand shoulder as he goes through this fast, continuous sweeping right-hand section of circuit. Got time and presence of mind enough to do so. Winds it up hard, and the distinctive high-pitched buzz of the two-stroke engines taking it down towards Winfield Corner, where Oldfield, though, brakes well and reins him in well, but gets crossed up himself, as Lewis was doing in earlier laps. Three to go. Up the hill they go. In third place behind them now on 39, moving through Peter Walker, who's in front now of Greg Johnson on 5, who's fallen to 4th.
And Walker is 10.5 seconds behind the leaders, so the rest of the field dropping back as this enormous dice continues at the lead. Paul Lewis on bike 3 in the lead.
And Peter Hinton on 33 has come up to 5th, pushing to Lee Roebuck on 20 back to 6th. See how much more economical of line Lewis was on the exit there, keeping him tight, straighter and getting the power on earlier and more of it. And now the scrap almost resolved. 2 laps to go, 3.8 kilometres when he hits the start-finish line this time. Look at how hard he's tucked him down behind the screen, then allows the left knee to get out into the windstream and help pull him into the right-hander. Then the top of the hill, and now this busy, hard section. Brake, change gears, swing it in here, run wide on the apex, come in, clip again, power it out hard to the exit there, right out to the stripe section. Downhill, let it sit up a moment, then tuck it in through the last right-hander. Now this left-hander. The only really hard left-hander on the circuit, where the tyres can be a bit cold, not gripping so well, and the rider has to remember it and think about it, although it's not so critical on these smaller bikes. Now getting this corner right, coming up to lap Michael Thean on 37, who had trouble just before the start.
Blue flag out, that's the final lap we're on now, bike 17. Chris Oldfield sees it and knows that his race is probably run right now.
Lewis leading the series on 30 points. Will get 15 for this win, taking him to 45. Greg Johnson was only 2 points behind him, but at the moment he's running back in 4th place and therefore would only get 8 points, take him to 36 as opposed to 45 of Lewis. Oldfield with 27 will get 12, take him to 39. If they finish in this order, as the race leader has 2 corners to complete. Laps Rob Donnelly.
Oh.
And nearly does it wrong, but then says, well, blow that, we'll have a little bit of jubilation. A run to the right-hander. That's Breville corner, and the checkered flag for Paul Lewis, followed by Chris Oldfield, and rightly jubilant. At a well-deserved but hard-fought victory for Paul Lewis. 4th place to Greg Johnson on 5, coming in behind Peter Walker on 39, then Lee Roebuck on 20, followed home by Tony Hinton, 43.
And as Will said, the points in the Australian 250cc Championship now stand to Paul Lewis, 45 points with 3 wins and a did not start in Queensland, from Chris Oldfield on 39 points and Greg Johnson on 36 points. So the championship still well and truly open, as Paul Lewis says g'day to us there. And the results: Paul Lewis first, Chris Oldfield dropping right back on the last lap to take 2nd place, at least 10 seconds behind Paul Lewis. And in 3rd position, catching fast, was Peter Walker. So perhaps a problem for Oldfield on the final lap.
Let's have a look at Paul Lewis here and how hard he was working his bike at Winfield Corner. Stop corner, as the riders call it.
Pulls his little wheelie. There he
and
is.
as the bikes are not yet gridding up, but very much in readiness about now to come out onto the circuit for the unlimited production race. There are few riders around who know more about wheelies than Dennis Neal. How hard are they to do, Dennis?
How these bikes are putting out these days, well, we're not so hard at all. If you just crack the throttle open, pull the clutch in a little bit, and up it comes. It's just a matter of balance from then on.
But a few people have gone wrong. Jeff Sale came unstuck in England, went over backwards doing it.
Yes, well, the riders are only human, and it's as you see, with the horsepower these bikes are putting out, you can flip them.
Well, there you can see just how small Paul Lewis is. And there must be quite an advantage for him in a race like that, where everybody's on fairly even power.
Right, on a bike like a 250, the weight's very, very important. The power to weight ratio on all these bikes is very close, so the lighter the rider, the better.
So let's hear from Bob Vincent with the race winner.
Paul Lewis, the leader in the 250cc Australian Championship, in a great race.
Yeah, it was a tough one. My good mate, Chris Oldfield, he was giving me a bit of trouble early stages of the race, but I just tried to keep it going because I knew the early stages of the races, you know, me and him were just having a bit of fun, and I thought he was hanging around out the back there, and then I said, right, I've got to turn on a bit harder and see if I can get away, and I did.
You do a lot of looking around on the circuit while you're racing. Is that force of habit or something that you adopted for this particular race?
For this circuit, all the other circuits you sort of don't have to look behind, but you know, it's best to keep to sort of know where they are, you know.
You had a little bit of trouble too in Winfield Corner a couple of times going around there today. Any particular problem?
Oh, I don't know. That's the only corner I couldn't handle, you know. Every lap I'd come into there, I'd sort of could catch Chris and pass him around there, but I thought, you know, a bit faster I would have been on the road, you know.
You've attempted to get overseas last year. Any chance of you going away this year to race overseas?
Oh, with a bit of luck, George Hughes, my major sponsors, sort of he's going to come over with me, but we're still lacking on finance, you know. We've got virtually nothing.
And what about any attempt to go upper class, say to the 350s or even the Grand Prix 500 bikes?
No chance. No, I'll stick with the 250. It's my kettle of fish.
Well done, Paul, and congratulations. Let's hope we see you take out the championship for this year in the 250 class.
Thank you.